Hello everybody, I hope all is well. Today I'd like to go over another scientific proof of how we know that the Torah is not a man-made document like people say, but the Torah is actually given by the creator of the universe, God. So we know that at one point in history that all the 7 continents were all together at one point in a supercontinent called Pangaea. And this was actually posed by Alfred Wegener in his book, The Origin of Continents and Oceans, and he published it in the year 1915. And he posed the theory of Pangaea, that you had a supercontinent called Pangaea, and over time, the continents drifted away until you have 7 continents today. Now, how did Alfred Wegener get this information? He had the scientific equipment and technology to get to pose this theory. He didn't just pull it out of nowhere. He has evidence for it. Now, I understand how Alfred Wegener got to this conclusion. Now, let's take it back. Let's go to the Torah. When the Torah in Genesis, where it describes the God creating the world, right, the acts of creation, the Torah tells us in Genesis 1, verse 9, ויאמר אלוקים יקרבו המים מתחת השמיים אל המקום אחד ותראה היבשה ויהי כן. So the Torah tells us that God said, let the water below the sky be gathered into one area, and that the dry land may appear. And it was so, ויהי כן, and it was so. Now, if you learn Hebrew, the word hayabasha means land, but it's mean land in the singular, not lands in the plural, but singular. So the Torah is telling us in the account of creation that when God created the world, it was just one body of land, not multiple continents as you see today through satellites. But the Torah, but when God created the earth, that it was just one land, hayabasha. Now, if we go to that's the written Torah on the left. Now, if we go to the oral Torah, and one of the books of the oral Torah is called Zohar, Kabbalah. The Zohar tells us about a significant geological change that took place on Earth after the initial period of creation. So to say the words of the Zohar tells us that one single continent came out of the water, and from it 7 continents were formed. The Zohar is telling us that when God created the world, right? It's quoting this verse. The Zohar is telling us when God created the world, there was one continent, one single land, and from it 7 continents were formed. And by the way, when was the Torah written? We all know the Torah was written over 3,300 years ago. Now, let's take it back. I told you, we understand how Alfred Wegener got the theory, but my question is, how did the Torah, if the Torah is a man-made document, how can a human being, I don't think he was there that long ago to see the earth forming. How can someone write in the Torah, black on white, it clearly says in the Torah, there's no denying it, that there was basically Pangaea. The Torah tells us there's one supercontinent, that it was all one land, and the oral Torah even commentates on it further, explaining that it went to 7 continents. How did the Torah know this? There was no technology, they didn't have all this equipment to figure out like Alfred Wegener did. How did the Torah know this information? Again, this is another strong piece of scientific evidence that the Torah cannot be a man-made document. There's no way a human being can know this information 3,300 years ago. And that's another scientific proof that the Torah is from the creator of the universe. Thank you for listening.